This morning. You're welcome to stay unmuted and you're welcome to chuck in your comments as we go along. That's absolutely fine, and I would like to break out of this format and go into sort of questions and answers because I know that that's lots of you will have bits and pieces that you want answered and you want to talk around subjects like that. So the EdTech demo program is there. There's so much EdTech out there and there's so much of it that I don't think actually works, but Tapestry happily is not in that category. Tapestry has been a bit of a shining light over these last few years, and as we know, development matters is changing, and people who are early adopters are in a situation now where they're not quite sure what to do in terms of their baseline assessments. Okay, so there's some bits and pieces. Have a quick glance at that. There may be something in there that's of interest to you, and you can, flag it up, shout out at me, use the conversation as we go along. But before we jump into it, let's just, let's just slightly recap on why on earth we're using this thing. It's been incredibly successful over the, 7-8 years it's been around. It says used by over 17,000 settings. I have a feeling that's probably more like 20,000. And let's be honest, data side of it is something that some settings will use extensively. Some settings won't really use the data side of Tapestry at all, because these first two parts are enough for them to say, well, that's worth it. Okay, the engagement with relatives and the time savings are pretty much enough for most settings to say, that justifies us using this, and we know that particularly with more experienced users, you end up saving a lot of time. So I think this thing's here to stay. Whatever happens with the frameworks, we're in a situation where we want to be able to communicate with parents, we want to be able to record what's going on in settings, and Tapestry, if it's used well, can do that very effectively. We're not going to cover the ins and outs of making observations today unless anybody is really desperate to go over anything. But one thing I would say is, if you've got a device where you can tap the button and you can speak into your device and it changes your voice into text, that may be something you want to consider going forward as a possibly a way to save you time. That's something that seems to stand out. Remote learning functionality. Again, I'm not going to talk extensively about that because we're here to look at the analysis and tracking. Let's just jump on. There we go. So one of the sort of major aspects to get your head around, possibly a few weeks ago with Tapestry, although having said that, it really doesn't make much difference at this point in time. We're 6 weeks in or something like that, 5 weeks in, and your year in Tapestry is set out as standard. Your year in Tapestry is set out with 6 half-termly blocks with, as it says here, a baseline time period that tracks for 3 weeks from when the first OBS is taken. So in effect, if you've got autumn 1, autumn 2, spring 1, spring 2, and summer 1, summer 2, plus the baseline, you've actually got 7 points of tracking there, 7 data points over a year. And actually, whichever scale you want to be using, that's a lot of data points in a year. And for most settings, they say that is way too much. Now, if you had about 5 children in your setting, you might say, this is going to work fine. For settings that have got 20 plus, lots of them, the vast majority are opting to go for this sort of model where they've got an autumn, spring and summer term there, and those are the points for data. Now, of course, when we say, so baseline would end at some point in September, not necessarily, you can extend it out to October. Autumn, a lot of settings kind of call it a day a couple of weeks before Christmas, certainly. Springtime will end just before Easter. Summertime, of course, for settings in the UK, it's all about having your early learning goals data ready to submit, and that is submitted in June. So actually by the time you get to July, sort of data considerations are gone. In any case, setting out your year with these 3 instead of the 6 is probably a wise move. It makes any observational data that you gather much richer, actually, because when you ask Tapestry to consider, let's say in autumn term, when it comes to like the middle of November, say, you say we're in autumn term, it will consider all of the observations up to that point from September. If you just have the autumn 1 and the autumn 2, you don't tend to have as many observations to go in there, and the richness that you get and the averaging out that might be useful just doesn't exist. So I can change that. And hashtags for tracking. Let's come back to that. So let me just go in. I know that we've got some quite experienced Tapestry users here, so I might be teaching your granny to suck eggs, as you might say in this part of the world. So here I am in a Tapestry account. It's a fake Tapestry account. I can't tell you that this is, you know, these observations are the best observations in the world. A picture of my son in there. We've got some other faked up observations. Obviously, we have to be very careful with data protection, sharing out things across the globe. So up here from control panel, you can see that under settings, summative assessments, down here you'll see how my assessment periods are set out in this setting with an autumn, spring and summer, and it always has to go to run the full year. That can confuse people sometimes, but it has to understand the year for its assessment periods. Again, don't be tempted to put in here baseline period, because up here under tracking, you'll see, let's look under tracking, you'll see there's a baseline assessment section that's separate. So you've got summative assessment here, and you've got baseline assessment here. Summative assessments relate to your dates in here. So we will have an autumn and a summer. Probably having this box ticked is a good idea, because it makes your data as live as possible. And yes, you'd need refinements. That one doesn't really matter. And the profile snapshot is the profile that you produce at the end of the year. That's year 1 stuff. Okay, so that's a really fundamental part of making tracking in Tapestry work for you. I'm just going to come. No, I'm not. I'm going to go straight into now the baseline assessment stuff, because you know, this is a fundamental need at this point in the year. So under tracking, under your EYFS, you can see I've got all sorts enabled in here, but you wouldn't need to have all of those there. In fact, I would suggest you, if there's stuff in there that you don't use, get it turned off. Under here, there's baseline assessment. And if I go to group view, you'll see that I've got data in here. And you'll see up here that you can filter according to whoever you want to see. You might have a couple of cohorts in there, so that's quite a nice way to not see the ones you don't need to see. But you can see on here, these little pen icons mean that this data has actually been overridden by me when I was inputting some baseline data for there. You can see down here, old Michael somebody here, these OBS, this data hasn't been overridden. So if I click on that one, you'll see that it brings up the observation that fed into that. There's another one, sound activity. It's got no picture on it, this one. Doesn't matter. It still was data entered into the account. So I'm just going to show you, if you're in a position where maybe you've got blanks here, or maybe you don't agree with what Tapestry is suggesting for these age bandings. If I go to individual, you'll see that I can choose a child, and essentially from here I can do my data. Now let's go to Michael somebody, because he's got a bit missing, and you'll see here that it gives you the dates of the baseline. So if you wanted to, you know, the baseline here is right in the middle of the year. That's because this child joined in the middle of the year, and then that was the first date of his observation. So it does make sense for those, you know, nurseries and preschools. Child joins halfway through the year, it will go for 3 weeks from the first obs. But if you need to change these dates, you can just click in there and change them. And what it will do is look at the observations in that date range and use the observations that are between, in this case, 3rd of March to 28th of March. Save changes, and then that stays. Now I can go in here and I can start choosing age bandings. Feels like a funny year, the last year of age bandings, really, I guess. And I can't say that I've ever been a fan of age bandings themselves. Feels like you make trouble for everyone by actually doing it in these monthly bands, at least up at reception level. It certainly creates some controversy that we don't necessarily need to have in our lives. So you'll see in there, I'm just putting them in. I could do a load in one. And even though there's no obs for that area, I'm putting the data in, and every time I click save changes, it updates, and you'll see it gives me the pen icon, so it shows what happened there. Once the data, you know, once you've input your data, if you go up here and click on locked, there's quite a nice little mechanism here where you can lock the data, save changes, and then you know that even if somebody went in and made an observation and backdated the date to between here, it wouldn't change what's in here. So it's a nice mechanism for saying, do you know what, I've done the data for that child, that's it, let's lock it up, and then I know that, you know, it's a nice little checking mechanism for you when you're doing it as well. If I wanted to go back and make changes, I can quite easily come in here, and you'll see it gives you a couple of options there. It's not going to make any difference in this case, but I can unlock and save changes. There we go. So essentially that's baseline data. You'll see in here that you've got summative assessment as well, which looks pretty much the same. If I go in there, you can see there's not much in there because the data itself for most of these fake children was in this year. So I go back to the autumn term there, you can see similar setup, data that's come in. These ones are just averaged out from observations. There you go, there were 2 there, 40 to 60 developing on both, so it's going to be 40 to 60 developing. And there are some there that have been overridden. So if I click on there, it tells me, all right, there was one, but it was overridden and made to something else, made to developing rather than emerging, I think. The color coding here can be sort of useful as a kind of at a glance, although do remember that Tapestry works on months, you know. Often, let's just let that person in. Often reception classes find the fact that Tapestry is working in these monthly bands a little bit, it sort of lacks use for them, because unfortunately, as we know, in a reception year in Britain, children go in, and whichever part of the year they're born in, they are supposedly supposed to get to the same standards by the end of the year. Just going in here, Emily, I don't know if you want to mute just for a moment. Sounds like a Hoover in the background. That would be some great multitasking going on. Just in here, there's the individual tab. Okay, so if you give that a click, that's where, again, we did this for baseline before, but again, for this part of the year, let's go to her. You'll see that you can go in here and you can put data in, or you can go and change things. Okay, so that was 42 to 60 secure. I can change it down to developing. I'll give that one a save. Sorry, there's someone else just coming in there. And it will save as we go along. You can see here, save the date. And again, I can lock it when I'm finished so that I know that data is there and secure. So Tapestry, if set up well with those, I would say with those three termly blocks, does have a pretty good system for tracking, at least with the old age bandings, which are going out the window, and for better and for worse is probably what a lot of people would say about that, isn't it? So I'm going to come back to the front, the observations here, because I want to make reference to the new situation that people are in, whereby they've got the new early learning goals. And if you want to activate the new early learning goals, they are up in control panel there. And if you go down here to assessments, you'll see that we can turn them on. There they are, early learning goals 2020. And if I go to configure, I can enable them. And of course, with all of these tracking systems, you've got a tick box there to allow relatives to see them or to not see them. Of course, if you're one of the early adopters, you're not going to be tagging early learning goals at this point in the year. That's going to come in the summer term, most. But whether you want the relatives to see them or not is up to you. Of course, with the age bandings, that has always been something that's caused the discussion and the controversy, and often unwanted. And so people often turn that off for relatives. Whether you have it on or off for relatives is another matter. Let's keep that on. Let's put that on. So that's where you can turn on and off your frameworks. If I've got one enabled, the characteristics of effect, no, let's leave that one on. What can I turn off? Let's turn the cherry garden off, which is for SEN. I don't know a great deal about the cherry garden, but I do know that Tapestry are quite pleased with it as an SEN framework. We've been using the year 1 and year 2 in some schools recently, and the pre-key stage 1 and 2 for some of our one-to-one cases. So that's where you turn that stuff on and off. Now back to observations. I'll just show you this little technique. If you are in a situation where you're feeling a little bit like you want to, use the word tracking. It's not really tracking in terms of data, but tracking in terms of, okay, I want to have all of the communication and language observations in one place, or I want to have all of the literacy observations in one place. If you look at the new Development Matters documentation and read it, you see that those different categories, although there have been adjustments, there are still those different sorts of categories in there. So you may need to look at it yourself and decide, which of those categories you might want to use, and possibly think about using this hashtags function. So if you look on here, it's an observation, which is for communication and language, and I've just typed in hashtag CL at the end, and the idea being that you would formulate a little bit of a code in terms of these hashtags, because you don't really want to be typing in hashtag communication and language each time. For one, people will end up spelling it differently, and it will end up into a bit of a muddle. If you actually get, you know, pretty firmly set up with a simple system with these little codes, hashtag CL communication and language. You know, I think I've got hashtag L here for literacy, and of course it could relate to all sorts of other ones. You'll see here, if I click on the hashtag CL, it's going to give me all of the observations. This is all of the observations across all of the children here, which have that hashtag CL, even if you can't see it here in the text. If I just go to edit on that one, you'll see indeed there it is, hashtag CL. Okay, so making this coded system could be a nice simple way to track what's going on. Now if I just click on hashtag CL again, you'll see that I can indeed use the filtering here to choose, let's choose a particular child. And then it's going to show me all of the observations with hashtag CL, but just for that child, Wilfred Johnson. Okay, there's my son. His name is Wilfred. His surname is not Johnson, but there we go. And he loves trains. So we've got hashtag CL just for that child. So I hope you can see that that's a very simplified way to have tracking within your Tapestry system, and of course that can run for the whole year. And at points when you want to look back and think about the development of that child in that area, then just by going through that process, you can bring up those observations on it. Otherwise, if you don't do anything like that, you've literally got loads and loads of observations with nothing to structure around digging into those observations. You know, you could have 100 observations of a child halfway through the year if you're doing well, and nothing apart from looking to work out, you know, how the progress is going. So think carefully, how do you want to track these children? Do you want this for all categories, or is it just some of the key ones that you want to use? And I've got a quick, if I just come back to you now, I've got a very quick slide on here. Is it that one? I think so. Yeah. Which shows you, you know, how this could relate. Down here, it's how it could relate to the new engagement model for special needs, with the 5 areas there, and look, luckily they've all got a distinctive first letter in their titles, and over here these are the 3 main ones, I believe, from the new development matters, and so of course you can formulate tags like this, but of course you need to communicate that very clearly to your staff about the use of these. If somebody tags with hashtag PS and ED and somebody else tags with PSED, then your system is getting a little bit trashed. So formulate something, think carefully about, you know, typing that in on a touchpad. You don't want capital letters in there, although I'm pretty sure, yes, when you do the hashtagging, it doesn't matter if it's capital letters or not, but you want something that a staff member can remember. You might have this printed in large type and up on the wall somewhere, and you want to communicate this to staff clearly about why you're using it, and when it should be used. So obviously there's an element of staff development there, but I think for those early adopting settings, putting a system like that in place at this point, because there's nothing else in Tapestry at the moment to do it, could be quite wise if you're starting to really build up lots of observations. Okay, I hope that makes sense. These slides will be sent over to you later in the week, so they'll be there as a reference point for you. I'm just going to come back now. I appreciate I've spoken at you for possibly about 25 minutes, and I'm going to come back and look into the chat here. Just have a quick look. If student moves from one group setting to another and already has a baseline, is another one created or added to? That's a good question, Nabila. If you transfer a student in to your setting, so I actually sorted this out for a setting just recently. So if I go over to, let's go back to Tapestry here, and I'm going to go up here to control panel, and you'll see here that you can transfer children. And of course, this is about either you sending children to another setting or you receiving a transfer. If you're receiving a transfer, you need to get this information. And if you're sending, you need to choose the children who you're sending off somewhere else. So that process is okay. To be honest with you, there's a few more clicks involved in it than most people would probably like. And actually the best way to do it is to be on the phone or on a Teams chat with somebody, and you can both click the bits you need to make it work. But once they've come into your setting, you choose to bring in the baseline. But let's say you've brought a child in and you're not happy with the baseline that's there. All I would do is this. I would go to tracking, and I would go to baseline individual, and let's say, who was that one earlier? Michael somebody, he came in. Let's say he came in and his, actually no, let's choose one of the ones who have an earlier baseline, because that's realistic then. Okay, so that could be a child who was in a nursery last year or a preschool, and then is now in reception, and you're looking at their baseline individual, and the dates are wrong for you because you want them to be September 2020. And you can see in here, it will, if you've brought in data, it will bring in the baseline data. There is a proviso on that, in that if in there, let me just recall this. If you're actually before, oh no, you can't do that. I'm thinking about a merged children. If you're merging children together, you can do something with the locked to retain it. Anyway, I've gone into the individual child. There's the baseline date. I can go in here and I can change it, right? So I can just type in there, no, you're on 2020, and no, that's on 2020, and that's essentially done a lot for that. And if I save that, it's going to update. Let me just remember, this is David Steer. Here we go. Better to get rid of the baseline from nursery when they move to preschool, or better to keep? Well, Nabila, that's kind of up to you. If that baseline data is not really important to you, then you can just get rid of it. One thing I will say amongst that is this: just because you don't bring in the baseline data actually as live data into your Tapestry account, it doesn't mean that the setting can't export it for you. Okay, so if I go to back to the account here, let's imagine this is the setting that's going to transfer children over to you. Now, if they go to their tracking and to their baseline assessment and to group view, they will then see the baseline for all of those children, And this can be filtered down. If it's a cohort coming over to you, they can choose that cohort. It's just one person, or that cohort. And then if they go to, and actually don't worry too much, if there's a few children in there that aren't going to come over to you, you can always get rid of them from the file that's created. And up here they could make a CSV file for you, so that's an Excel sheet which would have all of this data in it, or they can produce a PDF. Let's just make one of those landscapes, sometimes quite nice. If I download that, it's basically just exporting this data into a document that they could essentially email over to you, and they say, here's the data for the children that we're transferring over to you, and you can keep that for your records, because if that baseline data is going to cause confusion, and Tapestry will only allow you to have one set of baseline data, then that might be the best way to do it. So get the setting to export data from here. They can email that over to you, so you've got it, and then you've separated it from the baseline that you're going to do. Okay. I mean, of course, if you're in a setting and you're an early adopter of the new development maths framework, you might think, hang on, I'm going to keep their baseline because we're not actually doing a full baseline assessment ourselves this year. But that may be different depending on your strategy. I know that early adopters are doing all sorts of stuff to cover the baseline, and it is a shame that there isn't a bit more clarity there in terms of what settings should be doing or need to be doing. Come back to you, Nabila. I hope that made sense, and I hope that if you're transferring children into your setting, like I said before, it can be really wise to get on the phone or get on to Teams, and then you can kind of talk through what you're clicking on and what you're doing. So I'm going to just go back into Tapestry, and I'm going to sort of flag up some of the most useful parts for tracking children. And in terms of tracking children, I don't necessarily just mean where they are in age band. So this will apply to early adopters as well, to some extent. Like I said before, if you're using the hashtags feature, then that's quite sort of it's a slightly more limited way to track children, but you might find the simplicity of it is actually to your advantage anyway. If I share back to you, let's go to, so we're in baseline at the moment. If I go into tracking, wait a moment, my computer's having a wobbly there. Now you've got all sorts in here in EYFS, and frankly there's some stuff in here that isn't that useful and could be got rid of it, and of course there's going to be a bit of a cull when it comes to next year if everyone's on the new framework, and some of this stuff's going to become slightly less meaningful. Certainly age band tracker, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time for Tapestry as they adjust. If I come over here, you see we've got thoroughness. Thoroughness is a section that can be really useful, and it's the child picker here, I believe. If we go to child picker, you'll see from here, if I choose a period in time, I'm going to go back to where there are quite a few observations here. I'm going to go for all children. You'll see this child picker screen, so that's thoroughness child picker, allows you to get a chart, an overview of different areas and the number of assessments that have been made in those observations. So you've got number of observations over here, and of course that's going to be useful as a general overview. If I click there, you see it lists them by number of observations. If I click there, then that's number of assessments. So of course you've got assessments that have been made, as in, you know, a band has been selected with statements or without statements, and so number of assessments are in here. Essentially you've got a, you know, most observed to least observed over on the side here, and within that you can see the different strands and how that's going to relate to what you're doing. And of course bringing this chart up perhaps once a week, once every couple of weeks, is going to give you that nice overview of what's going on with the children, and possibly it's going to flag up some areas that you are not doing so much in and you feel like you should be doing more in, and it's going to flag up some areas where you think, we've done a lot there, we've done a lot, I don't really want to do loads more observations in that area, but hang on a minute, Michael somebody's had nothing, so we better get him up to speed in that area. In fact, Michael he's had hardly anything, so we'd better concentrate on getting him up on observations, and he's probably joined recently, so we're going to be doing more observations because we're thinking about the baseline for him, even though we might not be doing an official sort of data-based baseline. We might be taking more observations of him. So that a lot of settings say is a really useful chart, and up here you'll see that you can export it. So I can give that a click. It will again chuck that out as a PDF, which could be printed. You might print that onto A3. You might just print your bottom page with the bottom children on it. You might highlight on that print, you know, areas that you're going to focus on this week for staff. So it gives you, you know, it's data driven, but actually I would suggest this is quite a useful place for that week by week sort of feeling of who have we assessed a lot, who have we observed a lot, who do we need to observe now, who do we need to catch up on. Of course, back in the main part of Tapestry, if you go to children, you see that it does actually give you an overview here of how many observations have been published in this period and when their last observation was. So that, you know, that can also be a place to glance at, to think, okay, this is, you know, they were last observed 17th September. This child hasn't been observed at all. So that, you know, this area can, again, flag up a few stats for you about what's going on. Back into tracking, because I do want to flag up the most, what I consider to be the most useful sections, and feedback over the years has shown me that staff like the look of. Up here in the dashboard, you've got comparison individual, and if I go in here, you'll see this is very much for thinking about the progress of one child. And if I add in snapshots here, so I'm going to go from here where there's data, here, and this is data from last year. It's all fake data, but that's where it is. So I'm putting in 3 snapshots there, and of course you can put in the baseline as well, which is useful. So this, you know, this can start to be used. Let's put that at the beginning. This can start to be used, you know, once your baseline is done, you can start to look at this chart, perhaps with just that in there. Let's add a child in, and then you'll get a sense of how this works. Now remember, there's fake data in here, and so, you know, bits like this where I've just been probably messing around with the data, but you get an idea that it will start to show progress. There we are with 3 time periods, and you've got a nice key there. And so it starts to show that progress over time. Now, some settings got to the point where they say, we really like that. And at the end of the year, when we give our parents their sort of overview of where their children are, they were getting the snipping tool and getting this graph and actually printing it out for them, or perhaps exporting that document so it's provided to parents as a PDF. Okay, and what settings said to me is that, you know, it's nice for those children that didn't get to their early learning goal in any area for the parents to be able to see that there was indeed progress. Now we know that with the new early learning goals, where, you know, there's no exceeding, and I think you would have to be some kind of a genius to be exceeding in, you know, extremely a gifted child to be exceeding in over those new early learning goals. And there is no exceeding, there's just the 1 and the 2. But for children who don't reach early learning goal, it's nice to be able to see that there is still progress. And I would suggest that there's going to be quite a few children in that category who we can't truthfully say have reached all of those early learning goals, but they certainly will have made progress during the year. So that's another good place. That's under tracking, comparison, individual. And what is nice is that on a lot of these screens, you've got a button here, add current screen to favorites. So if I click that, I'll keep it like that. You'll then see that up here, in fact, if I refresh, up here, you can see it's there. So it's there for me in case I've forgotten exactly where it is amongst this quagmire of options. I can have that up there, and I could do the same for my child picker on thoroughness. I'm going to add that. It's a slightly strange name, child picker. I'm going to just call it by strand. Okay, and then you'll see, let's just refresh again, and that will save there now. You've got those 2 there. So if those are the 2 screens that you always come back to and use, put them as a favorite, and then you can always get back to them. Now there is lots of other stuff in here. At the end of the year, you've got the foundation stage profile, and obviously that's going to be a tricky time for everyone, because you're going to have 2 versions of that going on at the end of the year, but that's down there. And just coming back to baseline again, because what I didn't mention is that when you've got your baseline data complete, which that isn't quite, you've got 2 options here for exporting. And certainly in Cornwall, where I am, Cornwall Council likes to collect the baseline data, and schools are able to, if I export the CSV, school secretaries have a secure way to send that data over to Cornwall Council. And I'm assuming that other, well, I know that systems like that exist in other counties across the UK. What's quite nice about this coming as CSV is that if you've got, let me just open that up. You'll see, let me just share this because it's a little tip for you in terms of getting this done quickly. If you've got your baseline data exported from there, and you can see on there you've got gender, date of birth, and the categories there. Up here, you've got UPN. Now, for a lot of schools, UPN ends up not being in there, the unique pupil number. But if you've got another system, if you've got another Excel sheet with the UPNs in, and you put them in the same order, you can just literally paste those UPNs in there in that column, or perhaps admin staff in your school will be able to do that for you. But there's by pasting them in, there's a quick time saver there before they get sent off. Just make sure they are correct and in the right order. Okay, I'm going to come back to you. And I would very much like to open up now to questions and answers. I should have answers to most things. We've talked about hashtags. I've shown you a couple of the most useful analysis screens in there. If I'd like to hear about other requests from within there. There are some other bits and pieces that can be useful. We will go on to talk a little bit about staff and relatives activity, because we haven't looked at that.
Can we ask a question? It's Barbara here. We were just talking about it, and it will apply to Sarah and Nabila and some other people that are there from our school. Yep. And we know it's not about assessment as such, but when you create groups, because obviously we are teaching online now and we're setting those activities and stuff. Yes. So we have already set groups for, like, we have 4 reception classes. So we've got A, B, and C groups, okay? But now each of those groups is for each individual class. Okay, we were just wondering, is there a shortcut, like a way of just creating general reception A, reception B, and reception C without having to manually input and check each individual child going through the list, but just kind of dropping them from the existing groups already? Or do we have to do it manually? Unfortunately, there's no way around it. Do you know?
You can't duplicate groups as far as I'm aware. Let's just go in there and double check that. So yes. You could duplicate one and then add in the rest. Might be a way to do it. Let's just go in and have a quick look at the groups. And I would say sometimes people create groups and they don't need to create groups at all, because the groups relate to the cohort of children. So do your classes relate to the age of the children in any way?
So I will tell you what it is. So in reception we have 4 reception classes, okay? And at the moment we have a system when some children come in on 2 different days, and then the other group of children, so A, are coming Sundays in here. It's Sunday and Wednesday, and then B children are coming on Mondays and Thursdays, okay? Right. And everybody is online on Tuesday. It's a little different to the UK. So we create for each individual class, let's say my class is MS, so it will be reception MS group A, reception MS group B, reception MS group C. So it's easier for us to allocate the activities. Do you see what I mean? Like to manage online learning.
No, absolutely.
However, our online teacher colleague, who is basically delivering on different days to different classes, instead of having a headache of adding each individual group, she wants to have just all the reception children A. But obviously we can do that, but it's going to take us some time. We can put that manually, but we were just wondering whether it's a shortcut to drag the groups already that are existing on the system for us, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense, and I'm afraid that I think the answer is no.
Yeah, probably no. That's what. Yeah, but we thought, because it's always better to ask somebody who has got more maybe experience.
And of course, it's quite a new situation to cater for. It's quite a unique situation to cater for, isn't it? And when you set up a group,
exactly where you are now, we will just have to manually find all the children and just do it and tick.
If and of course this is nothing to do with their year of birth or anything like that, is it? It's just reception. So they're all from the same cohort. I'm afraid I think the answer is is no.
We'll have to do it. No problem. We just wanted to check with you. But
once
thank
it's
you.
done, it's done. You know.
Yeah,
once
exactly.
that group's there, it's done. Just make sure you label all those groups carefully.
Of course. Yeah. Yes.
So that people know exactly what's going on. Are you finding the activities section useful?
Yes, we are using them. We are using them. Like our online colleagues are, just putting the links there. We teach through like live lessons, and if we pre-record, we also upload it there. The only probably downside is that Tapestry only takes videos for less than 10 minutes. That's the only trouble.
Yes.
So we need to keep it, short, or do 2.
Yes.
That's the only downside. But other than that, yeah, it's been good, right?
I can tell you with the video aspect of it, if you're finding that 10 minutes limiting, and also there are possibly some extras. If you look at Loom, I don't know if you've used this system before. You can see on here there's a couple. Don't let it scare you. It's actually very simple to create videos with this thing, and it allows you to it puts in a little extension here. So let me just show you. And if you register with Loom, and then you've got a little you see my grotty upstairs room here. You've got a little form you can fill in to register as an educational establishment, and then and that gives you access to unlimited videos and some other bits and pieces that come with Loom Pro. So they're being pretty good to education at the moment. And you'll see here that you get this little bubble. And so of course I am recording myself in a bubble, in a little circle. And if I start recording, see, I'm on full desktop here. If I start recording, use to have the whole screen, and I'm just trying to think of something that's, and of course whatever's there, I can be talking about what's on the screen.
So you can kind of like share your screen with whoever is going to watch it.
Share your screen. Of course, you're speaking to the parent as well as a child, I'm assuming. You know, that's how it's working. So you can share with them something on the screen. There are some annotation tools in here as well if you wanted to sort of put a circle around something. And then once that's done, you can also share. There's a Loom app that you can install, and then it will appear like over any PowerPoints or anything like that. So you can basically record within a PowerPoint, like a story that you're telling. That's something like that. And when I would definitely have a look at this as a way to kind of expand the video abilities. And of course, I've just made a pretty rubbishy one there. All right, but it gives you this for copying a link. All right, so once I copy that link, let's say I'm in Tapestry and I want to create a new activity.
You just need to go to planned activities and then.
Thank you. It's not an area I've been in for a few weeks. Plan an activity, and you choose the children, and then you've got the notes in here. So you might write something there, but you could also say, have a look, look at this video.
And then you just paste the link.
Right, and Tapestry now makes these into hyperlinks for them. So let's say we've got all children are getting this activity, an amazing activity. And then once it's saved,
they can see the link.
You see it's there as a link, and the parent can click on it, and so you're opening up more options there really for using the video, particularly with recording your screen. They can be
particularly also, because you are not technically going over the limit, if it makes sense, because it brings you to like an external website. And it opens there, because right now we are obviously uploading the files, uploading the videos.
Yes, you should.
It's something to Explorer.
Yeah, you should find in terms of the speed for you creating stuff that it's going to be quicker because it's saving it directly onto Loom's server afterwards. So you should find you haven't got so much. Actually, there's not so much mucking around because it's just a link up with.
It's definitely something we can, share with the management and they can have a look.
Yeah, I would have a look. It will. I don't know if you use Google logins or
we use Microsoft Teams.
Microsoft Teams, but you can register. If you register with your Microsoft email address, you've then got. If you just look here, you've got Loom for Education account. There you go. They've got this form.
Yeah.
So once you've created your Loom account, just go to this form, and let me just put that in the chat, and then you.
Thank you. We'll have a look. We'll definitely explore. Thank you.
Yeah, worth it. I'm pretty impressed with that. With all of the platforms we're using at the moment, it's pretty great to have a tool. Okay. Well,
thank you.
11:35, and we're going to run till 12. There's 4 of us here. I'll keep recording. Is there it's never going to be quite adequate being remote like this, but we seem to have gone over a number of items. What else was I going? Yeah, if you're interested in, let's just come back here. So some of the sort of tracking here, a useful little feature under general now is that you can look at how active the relatives have been. You can also do a little bit of sneaky, staff observation counts. Well, we all know that just because you've done 10 observations in a day, that doesn't mean that they're any good. All right, so you've got to I would steer against anyone getting really number driven in terms of obs and thinking about what the staff are doing. But if you need that sort of information, it's there. But this bit can be useful if you're looking at the relative activities. Not that there are any relatives in this. There was a demo parent who's been rather unactive here, but it gives you percentages of what they're doing. So if there's a parent and you're feeling like, or you want to find out which parents aren't engaging that well, this can be a good place to go to. So that's under tracking general relative activities. And also, when it comes to creating the PDFs of your journals, and I know that at this point in the year, you're probably thinking, I'll be doing that at the end of the year, thank you very much. But it can be useful, for example, for your parents' evening type sessions, or just for your own peace of mind that you want to sort of export a load of journals and then keep them somewhere. There's never been a huge data loss through Tapestry. There was one incident a few years ago where I think they lost half a day's worth of stuff. But if you're somebody who likes to have a backup, going to your managed children and make sure, in this case, you'll be selecting all of them probably. If you go to export journals as PDFs, you can then essentially get Tapestry to make those PDFs for you that you can download. But also up here, and this is for the end of the year probably, you could do it midway through the year if you wanted to sort of say to parents, look, here's a record of everything we've done so far. If you put that on relatives, of course it's saying, look, these children don't have relatives in here, and allow a recipient to download. This is definitely the best way to distribute these journals to your relatives at the end of the year. It's very, very satisfying to fill in that box for a real class. Click submit, and then you see under your notifications that relatives are starting to download those journals. And again, just thinking about that side of things. Under the control panel, you've got history, and so if you ever need to track what's been going on in your account, including, there you go, that was me adding in an amazing activity. You know, you can filter this to, let's say, a download triggered by a relative, and then you would see, there's not going to be any, then you would see the relatives that have downloaded those journals that you created. So using the history section can be quite useful like that. Okay, coming back to you guys. It was very kind of you to join for the day. Like I said, I will send over the slides from the presentation. If you do think of anything else that you need some guidance with, you are very welcome to get in touch. You will see at the end of here a quick page showing that we have some further sessions coming up. We're doing these really quick blasts for TAs and beginners on the 5th and 6th of November. Various staff across the 28 primaries that I'm working with that want that kind of quick blast for the TAs on making observations. And we've got some other sessions coming up. We're about to publish a load more, bringing us up to Christmas. And you can find us, Digital Learning Cornwall. You can subscribe to our newsletter, and you'll get, you won't get bombarded. You might get one a week, just an update of what we're doing and what's going on. You'll find us on Twitter, DL Cornwall. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to make contact with schools all over. Lovely to see people from the Middle East today. And I can tell you that I'm slightly chilly up in my loft room here, so you might be finding the heat too much. If you want to send a little bit of it over here, you're very welcome. Okay.
We would love to. Thank you so much for your help.
Yeah.
Please don't get overly cold.
No, if I'm honest with you, let me just unrecord.